Greetings, boils and ghouls. Welcome back to Midnight Movie Massacre. So today we have for you a follow-up to a review I did many months ago for Anthropophagus, the Grim Reaper, or Anthropophagus the Beast. A couple other titles, I think, depending on which territory you're in. Anyway, that review is going to be for the spiritual successor to that film, and that is Joe D'Amato and George Eastman's 1980 American-inspired mindless slasher flick known as Absurd, or Rosso Sangue. Definitely just found out about this because I think my buddy Keegan, who may have turned me on to Anthropophagus, also told me that it had a sequel. Spent a long time trying to get my hands on a copy, ended up just breaking down and making myself a DVD bootleg. That was my stand-in for years, until I got this very nice Severin release. They cleaned it up quite a bit. It actually has the original Italian cut on there as well, so you've got the Italian cut and the extended, like, more violent American cut. And it's got, a couple interviews on there, all that good stuff, theatrical trailer, all the shit that you expect for bonus features, really. In any case, without wasting any more time, we're going to jump into this. Should be a pretty simple, straightforward review, because it's a pretty simple, straightforward movie. It's mostly just a bunch of gore scenes and a lot of running around on foot. It's not to say it isn't fun, just isn't something they put a lot of thought into. Absurd, or Rosso Sangue, literally translated meaning red blood, is a 1981 Panamanian Italian slasher film directed, lensed, and co-produced by Joe D'Amato. It's got a screenplay by George Eastman, who also starred in the film, alongside Annie Bell, Charles Boramel, Katja Berger, Ian Danmy, Casimir Berger, Hanja Kachansky, Edmund Purdom, and Ted Russoff. It's got music by Carlo Maria Cordio. It was distributed by Cinema 80, and it was released in October of 1981 in Italy. I'm guessing it made its way over here shortly after, as it was very clearly designed to be marketable to Americans. Originally, D'Amato intended for it to be a proper direct sequel to Anthropophagus, whereas Eastman, I guess, was opposed to the idea. There was a treatment that had been written, Eastman read it and disliked it so much that he rewrote the movie from the ground up as an American-style thriller. So basically, he made his version of Halloween. And apparently George Eastman's surprisingly accurate interpretation of most American slasher films is that it's just a bunch of people running around on foot and some maniac mindlessly killing people for a reason that might not even entirely make sense, and doing it in a gruesome fashion. And he's not entirely wrong. There's usually a little bit more to it in the way of story, but fuck it. Basic gist of this bitch is this Catholic priest from Greece, who is also a, geneticist, was doing these experiments that are never explained. George Eastman's character was exposed to some type of an element of these experiments that's never explained, in some fashion that's never explained, and it gives him some powers that are explained. But he somehow, again unexplained, ends up in America, and they're running around, Basically, the powers this experiment has given him is super regenerative, sort of Wolverine-style healing ability, and the ability to just withstand any type of trauma unless it's direct damage to his brain. So you can shoot him, you can stab him, you can fucking disembowel him, and he's just gonna heal up eventually and keep coming back, unless you destroy or sever his brain. Definitely comes into play later, as I'm sure you can imagine. Anyway, he gets disemboweled trying to climb the fence to this family's house where I guess he's going to murder them. But they end up taking him to the hospital, and this priest is kind of sneaking around, not trying to let the local authorities know exactly what he's up to, while also trying to apprehend this dude. I'm guessing to take him back and do more experiments on him that I'm sure they wouldn't explain, even if that ended up being the case. And he pretty much just starts killing people. The reason he kills people is sort of vaguely explained in that each time he regenerates, after basically dying or being damaged, his brain also gets bigger, but it doesn't generate the brain matter properly. It's the one thing that's too complex for these healing powers of his to affect in a good way, so it's driven him totally insane. And I guess he just fixates on this family because, I don't know, he did get disemboweled trying to climb their fence to murder him in the first place, so it only stands to reason he'd go back and try to finish the job. Along the way, he kills a handful of other people, and the priest eventually hooks up with a detective, because of course there's a detective, it's an Italian horror movie, and they really have absolutely no influence on the plot whatsoever. They show up at the very end of the movie, and that's about the involvement they have. It's just really George Eastman jogging around, killing the occasional person, and then eventually having a showdown with these kids at this house. There's a girl that's like in traction because of some spinal disorder that's like the, main daughter of the family, then a really annoying little kid with a stupid shirt collar, and like their nurse. Those are the principal characters of the movie. Their parents are at a really weird Italian interpretation of a Super Bowl party the entire time, so they're out of the mix. It's your classic babysitter at home with the kids getting attacked by this psycho, only instead of a babysitter, it's the nurse. As you can imagine, eventually the girl releases herself from the traction, and she eventually has to have a showdown with George Eastman, and I'm sure you guys can imagine how that goes. This movie's a lot of fun. There's quite a few people out there that like it, even better than Anthropophagus. I would not be one of them, though I would agree that there are a couple of qualities where this movie excels in comparison to its predecessor. The main one being pacing. The movie gets going and just trucks right along the entire time. There's no moment in it where you feel really bored. There's no exaggerated downtime to fill the fucking spaces, really. It just moves forward at a really good pace. And I would say that the soundtrack is probably better than Anthropophagus. George Eastman gets to do more with his performance because he's not just walking around all crusty and sunburned, rocking a skullet and eating people. He's actually able to emote with facial expressions a little bit more, and you can tell that he was having a lot of fun. Just maybe a little too overconfident in his writing abilities. It's not that he didn't have some good ideas, it's just there's no time given to it to flesh those ideas out. There's not enough characterization in the movie. You don't get to really care about any of these characters like you did in Anthropophagus. That movie had a good cast of likable different characters that all were fun to watch get bumped off. This one just feels very random and by the numbers, which I guess is kind of what they were going for, but it makes it a lesser movie in my mind, because they don't take those unique elements like they did with Anthropophagus plot-wise and actually expand on them. It also doesn't do anything to build anywhere near the level of cool atmosphere that Anthropophagus built. This is literally just him jogging around in some neighborhood, killing the occasional person, which is fun, don't get me wrong. They just sadly dropped the ball plot-wise and character-wise and sort of atmosphere-wise. There's no style to this movie. It's just straightforward, visceral fucking violence, which is fun with a few beers in you watching it on mute with your favorite metal album on, but not necessarily quality storytelling. Now, I know it might seem like I've been kind of negative on this movie the whole time, and I don't want that to be the takeaway from this. I really do enjoy it. It is totally worth seeing. It's a decent enough spiritual successor to Anthropophagus, and it's definitely welcome in my collection. It's one I will revisit in the future when I just want a mindless movie to chuck on and watch some shit with some friends, enjoy some violence, It's just not as good as its predecessor in terms of being a story, in terms of being a movie that has some style and substance to it. It's just straightforward slasher action, which isn't bad. There's a lot of ways they could have improved this movie, though. They could have cut out the whole shit with the parents. They could have just had them go out of town right out of the gate, and it would have opened up more room for them to do more with the buddy cop shit that could have happened between the priest and the detective. And they could have used that time to also flesh out more of the backstory of how George Eastman's character ended up this way. Also would have been nice to fit a couple more kills in there. They could have actually taken the time to shoot this movie with some of the style that they had present in Anthropophagus. Because, that movie, there's scenes in there that are straight up beautiful. And, if they were going to drag it out a little bit more, they could have, used some of the time and made it paced slightly less tight to do some of that cool stuff that they did in Anthropophagus, giving you that Greek island vibe. Them having this set in America makes sense because they were trying to do an American-style slasher movie, but it would have been way cooler set in Greece. It would have just been cooler all around if it was a direct sequel to Anthropophagus, but what we got is still a lot of fun. There's some areas they could have improved it, but at the end of the day, you could do a hell of a lot worse. So definitely get out there and check out Absurd. I believe this same cut of the movie is available on Tubi at the moment. I could be wrong about that, but it's definitely worth checking out. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. I certainly have. We've got more reviews coming on the way, obviously. A couple of swoop segments edited up and ready to go for you guys. So there's lots of content going to be coming out in addition to, like, our Kaiju Quarantine stuff. Got a couple of those in the bank that are going to be dropping soon, which is going to be nice because we're doing the Kaiju Combat Month over at Inside Movies Galore. So Kaiju Quarantine and Kaiju Combat are pretty much just going to wreak havoc all through the month of August. Look forward to it.